I have cooked for the dying before. Field kitchens, aid stations, the long staging camps where the wounded come in faster than they go out. You learn to feed people who may not make it through the night, and you learn not to dwell on the arithmetic. You keep the pots moving. You do what the work asks and you don't look up. I tell you this because I want you to understand that I was not, by any measure, a woman who invited things to go sideways. I liked clean edges, roaster in, roaster out. Sign the manifest, lock the pantry, sleep without dreaming. That is who I was before the 8th Kell went down on the fog shore of Orth's Reach. I was on loan from the Interstellar Aid Collective to a staging point 12 kilometers inland. 3 weeks of tinned protein and water reclaim rations for the relief workers. Nothing dramatic. When the lifeboat came down, fire across the low clouds, the sound arriving half a minute later like a slow apology. I was one of 4 civilians. Close enough to respond before the quarantine lock was established. We did not know about the lock until we were already inside it. The 8th Kell had been a CV refugee transport, 200 souls aboard, making for the resettlement corridor in the outer system. Whatever killed them started in the lower decks. By the time the wreck settled into the shallows at the fogshore's edge, most of them were already gone. The official count, ratioed to us through the cordon perimeter by a voice that was trying to sound neutral, was 187 dead. The remaining 13 were critical. 4 of our own group of responders had walked through the hatch before the authority drones arrived and sealed the perimeter fence. Myself, a young surveyor named Pole, a port worker called Greaves, who moved like a man carrying something he'd decided to carry forever, and a medic named Sura, who, as it turned out, was the only one of us who knew what we were actually dealing with. The contagion was hemorrhagic respiratory. CV-specific, Sura said, which was the only mercy. Humans could carry it on the skin without contracting it, which meant we would not die here, only be held here. 30 days minimum, she said. More likely 60, until the pathogen burned out of the site. No supplies coming through, no evacuation. The drones would push back anyone who tried to cross the perimeter line. I remember thinking about my pots, whether someone would keep them moving. We went in to try to stabilize the 13 who were still breathing. Within the first 2 hours, we lost 7. Surada did what she could, which was more than the rest of us were capable of. And Pole and Greaves and I did what she told us. Was mostly about not contaminating our own field kits and not making promises to the dying that we could not keep. The CV in the lower passenger compartment had the worst of it. They had been sealed in there, away from the initial contagion site, and so they had lasted longest. Some of them were small, some of them were very small. I found the child in the 3rd compartment from the stern. She had wedged herself under a cargo shelf that had come half loose in the crash. Someone had wrapped her in a thermal foil sheet, not a blanket. There were no blankets but the reflective emergency foil that every lifeboat carries for crash scenarios. It had kept her alive through the night. She was burning under it. Lavender skin, the savvy color, though on her it had gone the particular dull gray that a fever takes a person toward when they have been in it too long. Silver white hair. Enormous eyes when she opened them, that soft gray Sevi iris, filmed with fever haze, looking at me from under the shelf with an expression I recognized, because I had seen it in aid station wards for 15 years. She was not afraid. She was past afraid. She was simply waiting to see what happened next, I said. In the 3 words of CV I happen to know from the staging point briefing materials still. Here, safe. She blinked. I reached under the shelf, and I took her out, thermal foil and all, and I carried her to the central compartment where Sura had set up a rough triage station. I set her down and I looked at Sura, and Sura looked at the child and did the thing a good medic does, which is to give you an assessment in plain language without drama, she said. Fever this advanced in a child this small, pathogen load she's likely carrying, without antivirals. She said we were looking at 30% odds. Maybe 35 if the fever broke on its own in the next 12 hours. Pole and Greaves were with the others in the forward compartment. There was nothing more to do for them by then, I said. What do I need? Sura gave me a field kit. She walked me through it once. She said the most important thing was temperature regulation. Too cold and the child's system would shut down. Too hot and the fever would climb past the point the brain could handle. She said it was not complicated, but it was relentless. She said she needed to stay with the others who might still be saved, which was the truth, and I understood it. So it was me and the child, alone in the third compartment, with a thermal sheet and a field kit, and the sound of the fog shore outside. I did not know her name. I tried the 3 CV words I had. She did not respond to them, or to anything else for the first several hours. The fever climbed, and I managed it the way Surah had shown me. And I talked to her because Surah had said to talk to her, that hearing a voice, even a strange one, even a human one, was something a sick child's nervous system held on to. So I talked. Not about anything important. I told her about the pots. I told her about the staging point, the scrubby alien grass, the way the twin moons here did something to the tides that nobody had fully explained. To me, I told her about a dog I'd had once on a settlement station when I was young. I did not have a repertoire built for this. I used what I had. Sometime in the second night, I had lost precise track of hours. The fever broke. Not dramatically, not a gasp, not a transformation. She simply became cooler under my hand, and her breathing changed from the labored hitch it had been to something that sounded like actual sleep. And I sat back against the compartment wall, and I stared at the ceiling, and I felt something shift inside my chest that I did not have a clean word. She woke 4 hours later. She looked at me. She said something in CV that I did not understand, a short phrase, maybe 2 syllables. Then she reached up. This small lavender-gray hand with its delicate extra joint, the CV anatomy. And she touched the side of my face very carefully. The way you touch something you are not sure about, the way you test for danger and find none. I held still. She dropped her hand into her lap and looked at me with those enormous quiet eyes, and 30%. 35 if we were lucky. We had been lucky. The rest of the cordon time passes in my memory as a series of small, ordinary moments that were not small at all. Feeding her from the ration packs. Teaching her, through gesture and repetition, words for the objects between us, kit, sheet, water, hand. Learning the same way the CV words she offered back. She was not well for a long time. She slept a great deal. When she was awake, she watched me with a kind of careful attention that made me feel, oddly, that I was the one being assessed. There had been a pendant around her neck when I found her. Simple braided cord, a small disc of carved dark metal at the end of it, markings I did not know. I had left it where it was. One morning she lifted it off over her head and placed it in my hand, looking at me steadily. And then she held out her hand again, waiting. I put it back in her palm. She put it around my neck. I wore it. Pole got sick on day 19, not the contagion. Separate fever from the general misery of the conditions. And recovered. Greaves did not get sick but became very quiet, the way certain people do when they are processing grief that they have not yet named. Surah worked until she could not, and then slept, and then worked again. We were not a team so much as 4 people in the same circumstances, doing the same thing, which was surviving. On day 31, the drones announced the pathogen load at the site had fallen to manageable levels. On day 34, the perimeter opened. On day 36, a Sevi aid collective arrived at the fog shore in a low-atmospheric transport. 4 Sevi in protective suits, a medic, documentation. They had been looking for survivors since the wreck came down. The collective medic examined the child for a long time. She was small and wary with strangers, which she had not been with me, and she stayed pressed against my side during the examination, which the medic noted, and which I tried not to let mean too much to me. The collective representative told me through the translator that the child's name was Vesia, that she had had a family aboard the Avith Kel, that a maternal relative had been located in the resettlement corridor and was waiting. He asked if there was anything I needed. Any documentation, any formal acknowledgement of what I had done. I said no. He looked at me for a moment in that way people look when they are deciding whether you mean it. I meant it. I crouched down to Vesia's eye level. Some things about the CV farewell in the past several weeks. She had taught me in fragments, in the patient way she had with me. I said what I knew. I don't know if I got it right. She looked at me and reached up again and touched my face, the same way she had when the fever broke. That careful, testing touch, finding no danger, finding only what was there. Then she took Collective Medsic's hand, and she walked with them toward the transport. She looked back once. I raised a hand. She did not stop walking, which was correct, which was what I had wanted. I crossed the fog shore going inland. The scrubby alien grass came back under my boots. The same grass told her about in the dark, and the twin moons were up in the afternoon sky, the way they sometimes are here, pale and unnecessary looking in the daylight. My pots were 12 kilometers away. Someone had been keeping them moving. I touched the pendant where it sat against my collarbone. I had spent 15 learning not to look up, not to let the arithmetic get personal. Feed them, sign the manifest, move to the next station. Do not know how to undo that entirely. I am not sure I would want to, but I know what I am made of now. 8% odds, and a field kit and the long hours of a fog shore night. That is the inventory. Carry it forward the same way I carry everything, quietly, without ceremony, one boot in front of the other. It is, I have decided, enough.